A warning has come from a senior Bank of England policymaker warning that there is a trigger that could trigger the entire financial system to melt down unless something is done. Now, don't take this lightly. The Bank of England is the oldest central bank in the world, and the policies they say and things that they say should be taken seriously. And he warns us that there is a trigger that you need to be aware of that could literally melt down the entire system. And of course, like I said, he's requesting more action. So in this video, we're going to break down who he is, what he said, what this trigger that he's talking about is. We're going to look at some of the reasons why he's said this trigger could cause this meltdown, and we'll look at what history says. I think maybe his conclusions are wrong. And then we're going to talk about what this means for you and I, what we should be doing about it, and more. So let's go. All right, welcome back. If you're new to the show, my name is Mark Moss, and I make these videos so you can think differently about money, to change the way you think about money. Most of the information that you're receiving is wrong. They're telling you this information with a narrative, with an intention, with a purpose. And so when we can look to, I guess, read between the lines, we can see things much more clearly and take better actions for our lives. So let's go ahead and just jump right in here. I'm looking at this article that was put out on The Guardian. We're on their website right here. And he says that this trigger, that Bitcoin could trigger the financial meltdown. That's what the trigger is. He says it could trigger that. He says that it's like the dangerous situation that we had in 2008 when, of course, the entire global financial system came crashing down. If we go ahead and kind of dig in a little bit more, we see that, again, right, he says it could trigger a financial meltdown unless, of course, unless the governments step forward with really tough regulations. Because if government doesn't save us, who will? Of course, that's what he says. And he likens the growth of cryptocurrencies to the spiraling value of U.S. subprime mortgages before the 2008 financial crash. Now, that's a very interesting parallel to draw, and I want to dig into that in just a little bit. But basically what he's saying is that just like what happened, just like the entire meltdown in 2008 being caused by subprime mortgages, Bitcoin could cause the same thing, or cryptocurrencies, he's saying. Now, I want to kind of just dig into this a little bit. Down here, he says that while the finance industry was more robust in 2008, more robust than it is today. I don't know about that. And that government should be wary of overreacting to financial innovations. There are reasons to be concerned. So at least I like that a little bit. We've seen other policymakers like Christine Lagarde, previous head of the IMF, now head of the ECB, European Central Bank. She said that innovation threatens the financial stability. So innovation, by creating new products, by creating more efficient ways, better ways to do things, that threatens financial stability. What she's really saying is that it threatens their financial grip on the monopoly. But here, at least he's saying that we should be at least a little cautious of overreacting to financial innovations. But he says that we need to see how big this is in context. So there's about $2.3 trillion of cryptocurrencies, but the subprime was only $1.2 trillion in 2008. So this could be way bigger. And this is the part where it gets interesting. He says that speculation in subprime mortgages in the U.S. was driven by low-income households using mortgages with ultra-low interest rates. So this is more of the same thing. They're saying that the 2008 Great Financial Crash was caused by people like you and I, retail people who were buying homes. And we bought homes that we couldn't afford. We bought too many homes. And they're putting the blame onto you and I, and that's just wrong. So his entire conclusion based off the situation is wrong, and I want to show you what I mean by that. So let's jump in over here. What really caused the Great Recession, the 2008 Great Financial Crash? So we can see here what caused the banking crisis. There was Fligstein and Adam Goldstein, their assistant professor at Princeton University, so pretty prestigious, someone to pay attention to. They examined the history of bank action leading up to the market collapse, paying attention to why banks created and purchased risky mortgage-backed securities, MBS, and collateralized debt obligations, CDOs, in the first place. Why did they create these things in the first place? And why, he says, why did they ignore early warnings of market failure? Those are good questions. So you mean it wasn't the mom and pop retailers, you and I, that were buying homes that caused the entire financial system collapse? You mean it was because banks created these risky mortgage-backed securities and collateral debt? Let's dig in a little bit more. Conventional wisdom holds that housing industry collapsed because lenders of subprime mortgages had perverse incentives to bundle and pass off risky mortgage-backed securities to other investors in order to profit from high origination fees. So the Wall Street crowd basically was doing everything they could to get as much fees, as much origination fees as they could. And so they were bundling it. They had perverse incentives. Charlie Munger says, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome. So they had perverse incentives to bundle up and pass off risky mortgage-backed securities to other investors just so they could profit from their origination fees. The logic follows that banks did not care if they loaned to borrowers who were likely to default, since the banks didn't intend to hold on to the mortgage or the financial products anyway. So you mean it wasn't you and I that created it, it was the banks. They find that the financial institutions actually sought out risky mortgage loans. They actually sought out the most risky mortgage loans in pursuit of profits from high-yielding securities such as the mortgage-backed securities or CDOs. And to do so, they held on to high-risk investments while engaging in multiple sectors of the mortgage securitization industry. So it wasn't you and I buying it. It was the banks creating financial experiments, creating risky assets, MBS and CDOs. They bet many times, multiple times, double-digit times more on the financial system, on the mortgage industry than you and I buying houses. And so his assumption is wrong. And so if that assumption is wrong, then his assumption that it could trigger a financial meltdown could be wrong, except for maybe it's not. So let me explain by that. So first off, if you and I own Bitcoin, we own cryptocurrencies, and we lose our money, will that trigger a financial system meltdown? Of course not. Of course it won't. But what could trigger the financial system meltdown is when so many people leave the financial system, they lose control. So what do I mean by that? So the financial system, the central bank policy, driven by the central bank of the Bank of England, of course, but of course the Federal Reserve in the United States, they control interest rates and they control the monetary supply, how much money is out there. Now, if everybody starts leaving that system, they start losing control over it. And that's exactly what's happening. So over the last couple decades, we've seen the United States start to weaponize the U.S. dollar and sanctions on Russia and sanctions on Iran and sanctions on everybody, basically kicking them out of the global financial system. If you and I were having a party and we invited a bunch of people over and we started kicking people out of the party, eventually we kicked so many people out of the party, you and I are the only people left. And that's what's been happening with the U.S. financial system, with the dollar system. They've been kicking so many people out, sanctions on everybody, that they're getting less and less control. We've been seeing all over the world, China, Russia, Iran, they're de-dollarizing. They're moving away from the dollar system. And so as more people go to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, which is an alternative money system, it's a way to hold your money outside of their financial system, they lose their power. Now, eventually, if they lose enough power, then their financial system does melt down. See? So they're not wrong. It could trigger a financial meltdown, but for different reasons. It's actually sort of the point of cryptocurrencies. We can become our own bank. We can separate money and state, take away the state's monopoly on money, and we can have our own financial system. So their system will no longer be good. It could melt down, in their words, because we moved on to that. Now let's take a look at some other things I want to show you. What's interesting here is we can see, again, sanctions. So somebody who's been heavily sanctioned is Russia, of course. And we can see here in this article that just came out today, Vladimir Putin says he accepts crypto's role in making payments. This is on Bloomberg. Crypto has the right to exist, he says. And he also says that the U.S. is considering new regulations after the China crackdown. So what's interesting is Vladimir Putin says that cryptocurrency has the right to exist and can be used as a means of payment. So, of course, it's easier for someone like Putin to say this because he doesn't control the U.S. dollar system, the financial system. And so because he's being sanctioned, of course, he sees the need, the ability to use an alternative form of money in payments. We can see here, Russia has sought alternatives to trading in dollars since being slapped with sanctions in 2014. And so when you sanction enough people, when you kick enough people out of the party, they find alternatives. We can see in the United States now they want to monitor every single bank account. that has more than $600 in it. A lot of people aren't going to like that. And so a lot of people will leave those bank accounts. They want to now start taxing all your assets, even assets potentially in the near future, even taxing assets that you haven't even realized the profits yet. And so more people will start to leave that system. And because now we have an alternative system, because Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are there, that alternative system is there, there's competition. And so that competition will drive more people away as they continue to get more and more draconian. We can see here, Putin accuses the U.S. of using its currency as a weapon. And so that's exactly what we've been seeing happening all over the place. Now, to get a little bit better context on this, let's jump over to one of my favorite economists of all time, and I'm talking about Hayek. Hayek is a Nobel Prize winning economist, so he's somebody that you should be paying attention to. If he's not on your radar, you definitely should read it. One of my favorite books of all time, and it's a must-read. He wrote a book called The Road to Serfdom, SERF, The Road to Serfdom. I highly recommend you to read that book. But he goes down and he's talking about, now Hayek lived early in the century. I think he won the Nobel Prize in the 70s, I believe. And he wrote, these books back then. But he says here that Hayek believed it was markets and not states that guaranteed individual liberty. So it was free markets that allowed people the freedom, allowed people liberty to do what they want. Now, what is the definition of liberty? Well, he actually wrote a book called The Constitution of Liberty. And in that book, Hayek defined liberty as free of coercion. So I have the ability to direct my life, my money, my wealth in a way that I see fit that leads to my ends and my means. I'm not coerced into a decision. Today we see mandates happening all over the place, and that leads to coercion, meaning either take this jab or lose your job. Well, that's coercion. I have a choice, sure, but both choices lead to your ends, not my ends. So in a free market, it's a win-win, and we can make the decision, liberty, as he says, that leads to our own ends. Hayek, liberty is a policy which deliberately adopts competition, markets, and prices as its ordering principles. And so through competition, we're always going to get better service, better products, better prices. If we're viewed as a customer, they're going to value us more. They're going to provide us good value in exchange for whatever we can give them. And so the monopoly that the government has on money, which per the Bank of England says could trigger a meltdown, it's because there is now competition, because now we have an opportunity to go into Bitcoin, creating that competition. In the book, The Road to Serfdom, as I said, it's a good book you should read. He said that Germany and the Soviet Union's mistakes were in the state planning because it interfered in the natural operation of markets, disrupted liberty, and set society down a one-way street towards slavery. So mistakes were made in their state planning because it interfered in the natural operation of markets. Does that sound very eerie and fitting for exactly what's going on today? So I've been reporting all over the world. We're having massive energy shortages everywhere, all through Europe, the United States, through South America, Asia, for many different reasons, but all because of state planning, because of central planning, as opposed to letting the free markets figure it out. He goes on to say down here, the denationalization of money for Hayek, established currency systems lead to social inequality. So established currency systems lead to social inequality, which of course we've seen. Social and income inequality is the largest gap it's ever been. It says lead to social inequality as the government monopoly on them prevents the discovery of a better method of fulfilling the market's needs. In this, Hayek argues centralized economic planning is not the key to economic stability, rather market signals from independent actors. And then lastly, he goes on to say, Hayek's theory advocates for decentralized, permissionless network of nodes, much like those observed in his decentralized network. And so Hayek, back in the 70s and 80s, was arguing for a decentralized, denationalized money like Bitcoin. He just didn't know it yet. But what he's saying is that it's through this monopoly on money and state planning that causes these problems, which of course we're seeing in mass today. The answer is competition, and having a free market driven competition on money, leaving the financial system and moving into a system like Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. cryptocurrencies. And so while we go back to this article, we can see that he is saying that it could trigger a meltdown. Well, he's kind of right, but not in the sense that he says, not because investors will trigger the meltdown like they did in the 2008 financial crisis, but rather through competition, more people are leaving it. What do you think? Do you see the competition? Do you think that competition is healthy? Do you think that competition provides better service, better products, and better prices? Or having a state answer one option, is that better? Let me know in the comments down below which one is better. Now, I do want to say that moving on to these global energy shortages that we have going on, they're leading to food shortages, they're leading to supply chain breaking down, and that's bad. It's causing higher prices. It's causing disruptions in the market. It's creating a lot of volatility. Now, times of volatility are dangerous. And for a lot of people that aren't paying attention, you could lose a lot. You're going to be paying 50% higher for food, for example, 50% higher for energy, and so forth. So it could be disastrous. However, also in times of volatility, present some of the greatest opportunities that we have if we learn how to take advantage of them. So this volatility that we're seeing in the energy markets has created massive opportunities, and we're making huge profits based off of those energy plays. If you'd like to find out more about those energy plays, what we're doing, how we're navigating, and how we're making big profits during this volatility, there's a link to a free training I'm going to do next week. I'm going to break down what's going on in the energy markets, the food markets, the supply chain markets, and how we can find the opportunity to profit from this. We need those profits to offset the rising costs that we're having, so there's a link down below for that. Of course, as always, give me a thumbs up on this video if you like it. If you don't like the video, I don't know why, because I'm working hard. Either way, you can give me a thumbs down, that's fine, but leave me a comment and at least let me know why you say that. And that's all I got for you today. All right, to your success. I'm out.